Well, the Treasurer says he wants to end the superannuation wars, but right now he seems to be the one firing the shots. His essay, released yesterday, spells out new objectives for superannuation that philosophically give a hint there'll be limits on superannuation tax concessions in the future. He also wants to restrict people gaining early access to their funds. Broadly, the superannuation industry welcomes those comments. So let's bring in here the Chief Executive of the Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia. The Chief Executive is Martin Fahy, who joins me from the ASFA conference, which started in Brisbane today. Martin, many thanks for your time. Can I just start on the Treasurer's own rhetoric here? The one thing I know is that what people hate about superannuation is change. They are decades investing for their retirement, and if there is change, they resist it because they are not the rules that they basically have lived their lives by.
That's right, Ross. I mean, every budget since superannuation was introduced 30 years ago has brought about changes to superannuation settings, and we've had in excess of 15 reviews of superannuation. So I think the Treasurer's commitment to an objective for super offers the opportunity of bringing stability to the policy settings.
But it seems to be one more set of changes. That's my view about this. That why do you need that? Because for 30 years we've had change after change. Is this because our demographic is changing? Because politicians, bureaucrats, the industry have not appreciated just how much the demographics of Australia would change over this period?
There's no doubt that we face the same ageing challenges that other OECD countries face, but I think, Ross, part of the initiative for the debate on what's the appropriate cap on superannuation comes from the Treasury review by Mike Callaghan, where he highlighted there were 11,000 accounts with more than 5 million in superannuation. And as part of his observation, he felt that it was worth having a closer look at that if we were to achieve sustainability and equity in the system.
OK, so we're looking at this chart now that you provided us, and it basically shows the expenditure on the age pension. In other words, the amount of money that government spends on age pensions will be lower than the amount of money that the government is spending on superannuation. Why is that a bad thing?
It's actually not a bad thing, Ross, because, if we compare it to our OECD counterparts, our age pension is about 2.6% of GDP in terms of fiscal burden. Our European counterparts are 6, 7, 9, in Greece at 16%. As we've invested in superannuation and built superannuation balances, more and more of the heavy lifting's been done by superannuation, and less people will be relying on the age pension. So that crossover point that we reach in 2045, the number of people on the age pension goes down, and over 50% of Australians will be self-funded in retirement, and therefore it's appropriate that they get tax concessions for that. I think the bigger sustainability issue is, do we really want to be supporting very, very large balances above 5 million with tax concession when women and low-income earners are not necessarily getting enough into their superannuation?
OK, so a couple of things here. The low-income earners get an age pension. So why is it you'd be trying to give more tax concessions to them when they get the ultimate tax concession in an age pension? You sit there and talk about, sort of where does this balance lie? The people with $5 million, surely they've just played by the rules so far. They've done what the government asked them to do. They've pumped up their superannuation. Sure, they've taken advantage of the tax concessions, but haven't they done exactly what governments have asked them to do?
I think these generous tax concessions were designed for an era, 20 years ago when people had less time to accumulate balances. They've remained as a persistent part of the system, and as a result, we now see superannuation as part of a broader wealth management strategy and estate management strategy. What we want to do is make sure that we can have the age pension available for those that need it, but also address what's called the low-income superannuation tax offset, the LISTO, which means that those people on low income get a tax concession that they can really use for their super contributions. And we also want to see some of the savings of about 1.5 billion used to pay super on paid parental leave to address the gender gap in superannuation.
OK, so in your pre-budget submission this year, ASFA has said that it believes that the cap on superannuation, where it gets tax benefits, should be $5 million. How did you arrive at that figure?
That figure was actually an observation that was made by Mike Callaghan as part of the Retirement Income Review, where he pointed out that there are 11,000 accounts in the system with over $5 million. And indeed, we know there are a number of accounts with over $100 million. And he suggested that as part of equity and sustainability in the long term, we needed to look at the concessions that were given to these balances. Ultimately, a $5 million balance provides more than enough income for somebody to, if you like, live a very comfortable life in retirement. And it's unlikely that somebody would actually spend that amount in the duration of their retirement.
Okay, so does that mean that that person beyond that amount of money would just go back to the normal tax rates, or is it that they'd go back to the 15% tax rate? Because there's already a limit for people in, sort of do-it-yourself annuity-style products of $1.7 million where they get the income from that tax-free. So this is a totally different thing, isn't it?
It is. This is the total amount in superannuation assets rather than the balance transfer cap of 1.7, which is probably going to go up to about 1.9 million with indexation. What we're saying is that amounts above 5 million shouldn't attract the superannuation tax concessions, and that we should look at alternative ways of taxing that income. And this means that obviously there need to be transition periods, but it acknowledges the fact that above that 5 million, there's a significant earnings on that, and we really feel that it's not equitable or sustainable for them to continue to attract the tax concessions, which were not designed to accumulate these large balances.
Well, Martin Fahy, that is the conversation the Treasurer wants us all to have at the moment. You and I have just had it. Many thanks for your time today.
Thanks very much, Ross.